Hey Guru Nation, how's it going? First of all, thank you so much for watching. Make sure you like, subscribe, comment, share. It really means a lot. It seems like a little bit, but it's a lot. It helps me out a lot. It helps me out with the algorithm. I got asked a question the other day from somebody who has a job interview today, so hopefully it's not too late. I have a position for a clinical research translation position. I was wondering if you have tips for the interview since I don't have previous clinical research experience. So more specifically, as an experienced professional in clinical research, what are your thoughts about the importance of translation in clinical research? So we actually talk about this quite a bit on Latinos in clinical research. It's very important because Spanish is the second most spoken language in the United States. I'm going to focus more on Spanish, but this applies to anything, any language that's justifiable. Like, for example, if there's a large patient population, Mandarin's a perfect example. San Francisco, huge Chinese population, so it makes sense there. Downtown LA, huge Korean population, so Korean translation makes sense there. So I'm going to focus on Spanish. The examples are Spanish, but basically it applies to any language in the United States. So the importance of this is tremendous. First of all, the industry needs research-naive patients. A lot of those research-naive patients, English is not their primary language. Now, here's where it gets tricky. Sites, this is why it's an advantage to know Spanish, because sites in heavily Spanish-speaking cities, regions, need bilingual staff. I'm in one right here, Yuma, Arizona. I speak Spanish, but we have staff that speaks much better Spanish than I do to be able to handle some of the Spanish-only population that we're inevitably going to get. So translation becomes important. Why? Because the IRB, the Institutional Review Board, always asks the site, do you need the informed consent translated in any other language? Usually a follow-up question is, do you have staff able to translate the informed consent? Sometimes sponsors are a little stricter than IRBs. Sometimes sponsors, especially when it comes to psychiatric trials where there's psychometric rating assessments, where you need specialized translators, so you need certified translators in those cases, sometimes they won't even allow it just because it's so many things that you need, because in psychiatry it's a lot of interviews, it's a lot of questionnaires, so you can't just have anyone do this and interpret it and rate it on a psychological level with a psychological test, right? Assessment. So I've seen in psychiatric trials a lot of this either rejected by the sponsor or allowed if the site does have a translator. So sponsors can vary, but the IRBs usually don't. IRBs care about patient safety first. They don't care so much about efficacy of the study. The IRB's job is for patient safety. Sites typically can hire and put who they want to do whatever task. So if somebody's adequate by the site to do translation, you don't need to be certified translator. You just need to have somebody who speaks that language. So from a retention standpoint, once the patient's already in, it should be obvious if you want more patients that speak certain languages, so the industry is pushing for diversity. If you want more Spanish or Latino people in the trials, it would help to have somebody at site speak their language so you could pre-screen them and then recruit them. That should be obvious. What's a little less obvious is the patient retention aspect. And I think it's super important, and this is what you should focus on in the interview. It's super important that you talk about retention, because in a study, you constantly need to encourage the patient to, first of all, show up for their visits. Second of all, to be compliant with their medication. Third of all, to be compliant with their patient-reported outcomes. And this is where the translation, I think, becomes super important and underrated. Patient-reported outcomes, so diaries, surveys, or even just calling in. There's several phone visits in most studies that patients have to call in and report on any adverse events they may have. It's super important if somebody's speaking Spanish to have somebody on the other end of the phone or the text be able to understand what they're saying. Same thing with the patient-reported outcomes. A lot of those patient-reported outcomes are English only. You may need help with a translator. So the family might have somebody who can translate the patient-reported outcome to the patient. Sometimes the patient-reported outcomes are already translated, but don't count on it. So this is where that coordinator or whomever, whatever your role is at the site, this is why it's super important, and translation super important. And I know as we go forward and we get more diversity in this space, patient-reported outcomes, e-patient-reported outcomes, or just paper-reported patient-reported outcomes are going to become super important for translation. So hopefully this helps. Hopefully you do a great job on your interview. Hopefully you get it, and then you report back how it's going. And we'd love to feature you on my channel and on Latinos in Clinical Research. So keep me updated. Good luck. Talk to you later.